Want insight, encouragement, and truth about writing, speaking, and creating? Welcome to For Writers and Speakers, the Called Creatives podcast with myself, Alli Worthington.
And I'm Lisa Whittle. Today's guest is Brandi Wilson, speaker, life coach, and author of new book, Better Than Okay. We're talking about so many great things today, so let's get into it.
Brandi, welcome to the show. We are so excited to have you. You are a coach, you're a speaker, you're an author, you're a woman of great depth. We are excited to learn from you.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be with you guys.
Okay, so you were used to speaking in front of people, obviously.
Yes.
You've been doing that forever.
Yes.
How did your first book come along? And then tell us kind of the story of, you took a long time between first book, which is a compilation book, right?
Yep,
And
for
then
sure.
the book that you just launched, like, this is your book. Kind of give us a little bit
Yes.
of your journey there, the publishing journey.
Yeah, I have actually always been a writer. I have my master's in education and my emphasis is writing. So back before I even had children, I taught fourth grade in the state of Kentucky, and that was when they did portfolios. And I oversaw 125 fourth grade portfolios and taught all of them writing. And so I knew writing at a fourth grade level very, very well. So that was probably how I started realizing that I enjoyed the writing process. I ended up leading a ministry called Leading and Loving It, which helps equip women in ministry and church leadership to love their life in ministry, with my best friend, Lori Wilhite. And Lori is definitely a writer at heart. And she wanted to put together a resource for pastors' wives and women who were on church staffs, because we realized we were getting the same questions over and over. How do you deal with criticism? How do you handle loneliness? Can you have friends inside your church? So we ended up about 10 years ago publishing a book by the same name as the ministry, called Leading and Loving It. And that one we just kind of sat on for a little while. When I wrote that book, I was actually a pastor's wife at the time, so it made a lot of sense. And then about 7 years ago, I walked through a separation, and then in 2017, a divorce from my then husband, who was a well-known pastor. And everyone kept saying to me, like, you should write a book. You should write a book. This could be a Lifetime movie. And I just kind of knew that that is not what I wanted for myself. I was trying to find a resource that gave me hope in the midst of feeling utter hopelessness, and something that told me what could be next steps of healing to take. And I couldn't find it. So probably about 5 years post-divorce, I had a friend reach out and ask me if I'd ever considered writing a book. And at that point, I had started talking to a lot of women who were walking through divorce or separation, or even, a few years post-divorce, felt stuck. And I thought, okay, I think I can do something about this. So I ended up, my friend who was an agent reached out, and she helped me pull together a proposal, and met with a couple of publishing houses. And one of them I just felt like I fit with a little bit better than the other, and asked if my acquisitions editor, as part of my contract, would come, because I knew I could write the content if someone could help me organize it. But I had so many thoughts and ideas bouncing around in my head, and in different, like, Google Docs where I'd start working on things. I did request, could my acquisitions editor come out and spend a day with me and teach me how to organize all of these thoughts into an outline for a book. Jennifer Dukesley is my acquisitions editor, and she generously agreed. And I started that writing process in February of 2022, and then turned in my completed manuscript July 31st of 2022. And then it just released. You spend a lot of time editing. But my book, Better Than Okay, just released July of 2023. So It was a long process. That's it.
Better Than Okay. We love it. We love it. We're going to talk to you a little bit more about that. We love Jennifer Dukesley, by the way. We've had her on the show, and she's an incredible woman. So here's what I want to know. When you have a story that's really, really tender, when you have a story that's very close to your heart, obviously a part of you, and it's a difficult story maybe to tell. This is my kind of twofold question. When do you know that it's time to tell it and it's okay to tell it? And how do you tell it when someone else is involved? Because this is a question that I get a lot. How do I know when I can tell it, when I'm ready to tell it? And it's tricky. It involves somebody else. And so what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to realize that I was ready to write out of my scars and not my wounds for a couple of reasons. Writing out of my wounds meant I was just bleeding all over everyone. And especially my children had been through so much at that point. I did not want to cause any more hurt in their lives. So when I was to the point where I knew that I could tell my story from these scars that represent all that I had learned and walked through, that felt like a healthy time for me to be able to write it. One of the things that surprised me as my launch day got closer was the number of people who said, because as you said, Lisa, my story involves another person. The number of people who just kind of expected me to write this tell all, air the dirty laundry, put it all out there. And that was never my intention. I think the way I viewed it was he had taken enough of my life and stomped all over it and disrespected it and trashed it that I was refusing to let him take any more. So for me, it became this conscious decision of I'm writing a book about my own story, about what God chose to do in me when I chose to begin again. And that's the only thing I have control over, which, I don't have control over his response, and I don't have control over, anything related to decisions he makes and does. But I did have control over how I chose to handle what I had been through. So yeah, that's kind of how I wrote a story that involved another person, but I really made the book about me and my healing journey and how God showed up in that.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much wisdom there for women who are thinking about writing their stories, especially. Sometimes it is just the automatic assumption, I'm going to tell my story of abuse, or I'm going to tell the story of the partner who cheated on me. So many of those things, but not all those details need to be told. Like you're saying, like we can tell our story and not kind of lay everything out on the page. I wonder if for you were able to talk about things because some things were in headlines, that some things happened, right? So it's not like you ever had to go to him and go, hey, can you sign this release that I can say that you did X, Y? Because
for sure,
it's just there. I think that's one of the key things as anyone listening right now, if they're thinking about telling their story, we can only tell the part that is public knowledge. And if we want to say anything about someone else that they may not be flattered by, we have to get their permission. It can be very, very awkward and put us in a difficult situation legally. But
for sure.
you,
and I will
handled that really well.
Well, Bethany, one of the things they told me up front and was on my list to ask for was a legal edit. And Bethany House did a legal edit. Once we got the book, pretty close to finalized, they went through, and I'm a deep feeler. So in my writing, I talk about my emotions, and it is okay to talk about how a situation made me feel. So that's the way I felt like I could really validate what other people had walked through without putting all the dirty laundry in black and white on paper, was just to be able to talk about how what had happened caused me to feel as, a woman who was just trying to be a great mom and great wife.
Yeah, and that's really smart because we are allowed our own feelings. You are allowed and don't need to apologize for the way something affected you, which might be different than the way it affected someone else or the way they perceived it. And that's very different for different folks. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Great question, Alli.
Well, for us, because we have Called Creatives Publishing, I wanted to talk about it because it's something that we are constantly talking about with our authors. Even, quoting someone else, you have to get a form and you have to have that person sign it. And I've been through the legal review process. We did a legal review, Sonderman did, for Standing Strong, just because I'm writing that story about leaving my job and, telling to some degree some of other people's experiences too. So it's a lot of permission, a lot of legal review. And I think it's surprising to future authors when they hear oh, I do want to tell my story, but maybe I don't want to tell everybody else's story, because there's a lot in there. For you, was anything else surprising as you went through the publishing process for this new book?
The vulnerability I felt around publish day, but launch day. I think the writing process, I journal every single day, hundreds of words. Honestly, the process of writing the book I think because I'd lived it, because I'd been processing it, I had lots of therapy. The actual process, I think the friends closest to me who knew what I was doing, they just kept expecting that to be something that brought me down. And it didn't. It felt great. I was really proud of it when I finished it. I'm proud of it now. I was proud of it the day it launched. But the vulnerability of anyone can now hold my story in their hands was overwhelming to me the day that the book launched. And I think also the reality of, 6.5 years before, I didn't know that life would one day be better than okay. I was terrified. I was trying to figure out what was next. I had way more questions than answers. So even the emotion of like, gosh, I did it. I redefined family with my kids like nothing was missing. And I clung to God on the days that were really dark. And, it wasn't perfect. And I've had lots of bumps and lots of, things that don't go on Instagram happen, but just very overwhelmed with all the emotion of, well, now anyone can find my story and read it was a lot to take in. That kind of continued for the first week. And then by week 2, I was like, okay, this is awesome. It was, I'd had enough people reach out and read enough comments and reviews. I was like, okay, this is well received. But it just feels very vulnerable to put your story out there for everyone to read.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think something that all writers can relate to is the feeling of vulnerability. And something else that I think we can relate to is something called imposter syndrome. Is that something that you have ever dealt with? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting you asked that, Lisa, because I was in a coaching session a couple of weeks ago with Mike Foster, who, is just like one of the best. And he and I were talking about my business and the coaching stuff I do and kind of streamlining it and what was next for me. And I would say, well, I can do this, but so and so already does that. And I could do this, but so and so already has something like this. And he was like, I've never asked you what anyone else is doing. I have asked you what you want to do. And I think, yes, imposter syndrome is very, very real. I think I am very fortunate to be surrounded by lots of strong, Christian female leaders, you two in that group that I see doing really wonderful things. And there are times I think, should I be doing this? I just want to take my dog for a walk and, take a nap. That sounds like a good plan for today. But yeah, I think another person who challenged me on that was Hosanna Wong, of just like, you have such a great message to tell, and you are not being obedient to God if you don't step forward in what he has asked you to do. I had actually said a prayer a few years ago, like, if I'm going to write the book, if I'm going to write a book, this is the timing I want. Just to myself, like, God, if this is going to happen, it has to happen on this timeline. And it happened on that timeline down to the month that I had laid out. I wanted it to happen, as far as like when the contract came through, when the book was turned in, when I was able to release that, and how it impacted the other parts of my life. I did feel like it was something God was calling me to. And I think we have a really bad habit of looking at other people and thinking, but my Instagram isn't growing as fast as theirs, and my platform isn't as large, and I don't get asked to speak at this and this, rather than just being like, okay, I have a message to tell and to share that's going to make an impact on women. And I have to be obedient that God has given me the opportunity to use my suffering as a survival guide for others. I have to dig into, am I being obedient to what God has called me to do? And that helps me battle the imposter syndrome when it creeps in.
So good.
So good.
Yeah.
I love it. We've all said the same thing. So good. That's
So good.
because it's great advice for everyone, whether we
Yeah.
haven't written our first book or we're about to write our 10th book. Imposter syndrome can still take us out if we're not careful. Now, for every writer, future writer who's written 20 books, there is one topic that stresses us out, and that is audience building, right? Building an audience, whether it's email or it's social. But we love to get practical on the show. We love to give brass tacks. For you, what's working? What's not working? Like what's going on in your world right now? Just gonna give us the lay of the land.
One thing that's working for me is I am trying to talk on Instagram more, and not like law, and Facebook as well, not even necessarily live things, but little
Mhm.
90 to 120 seconds. Like, hey, I had a client the other day and she said the thing she's struggling with right now is how her ex has chosen to rewrite their entire history. And let's talk about that. And I kind of just give, a couple of highlights to that. Like, if you're experiencing that, that is normal. I hope you have a great day. My best friend has said to me, authenticity is your superpower. And I think I am kind of just the girl next door. So when you hop on and you say something like that, it's not from a super heady place of lots of degrees and psychotherapy and all of that. It's just like, hey, this is really what will happen. And if you're experiencing that, that's normal. Here's how you can kind of snap out of it. And if I can, help you any further, let me know. Go to my website and see what offer I can offer you. But I think that's worked for me. I mean, I'm terrible at it, and my best friend is great at it. And every time I say something, she's like, that should be a lead magnet. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it stays in my head and doesn't happen on Canva. So I think the videos I'm pretty laid back about, and doing that seems easy, and I can just kind of like make it happen and move on, without overthinking it, without thinking, is this beneficial to my audience? I know it is, because the audience that follows me is also the audience I'm working with in coaching and hearing back from on the book. So it ties it together to know I'm speaking on something meaningful.
Now, just let me just add in a little thing. Anything for you that you've tried in audience building that hasn't worked for you, and what did you learn from that? I mean, I have a million tales, sadly.
Yeah, I will say I don't know that I managed my book launch team as well as I should have. They were all super excited and great, and I just got overwhelmed by it. And definitely, they got everything they were told they would get as being part of the book launch team. I just know I could have built into it better. I think whenever you do a project like that on your own, it is such a learning curve of what I need to be doing. And some people say book launch teams don't work. Some say they do. I know that that's a debate. Mine were all.
It's a struggle in 2023.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think when you're a new author like me, it was easier just because I think people wanted to help me spread the word. But it's hard. I just think it is hard in general to make it as big of a time investment as I need it to be, when so many other things need to be happening that impact a broader audience.
Yeah. I think something that a lot of people may not realize is that a lot of authors, almost every author I know, put it that way, is managing about 5 to 10 other things that they're doing. It's not the only job that we have, guys. We have
exactly
families or a coaching business, or, we're traveling to speak, or whatever else we're doing. And so, it is one of the things that we do. And if it were the only thing that we were doing, then we could perhaps manage a launch team better, or be on social media 24/7. It is a part of what we do. And so it's one of the things that's really difficult. And so giving ourselves grace for launching a book had to become part of my rhythm. It is weaving in this massive, massive undertaking. And boy, it is, when I see it coming on my calendar, like, this is what I'm going to start writing, because I reverse engineer the processes we must do. When we see, here's the deadline for when the book is due. If you're a career author, you know how this rhythm goes. And then you reverse engineer what that means as far as when it has to be turned in, when you have to write this chapter and all these things. When I see that coming on my schedule, I think, okay, so this is when I start to go into like not washing my hair mode.
Yeah.
And getting in this like whole headspace. And it's just very difficult.
This is TMI, but this is very relatable information. I, like, the last week before my deadline, I didn't wear underwear the entire week because I was so behind on laundry that I was just like, I don't even need underwear. I don't have time to wash it. I'm just going to put on a pair of sweatpants confidence and keep going.
Not
So,
only
like
is that
I said,
relatable, but I can tell you that is what people, that might be the gold of this show. Everybody needs to understand that when you are in that mode, you might not be wearing underwear for a week. And that
no,
is just the
I'm like,
reality
why
of
didn't
it.
someone tell me? Like,
Yeah.
Brandi, you're not
Yeah.
going to wear
Here's-
underwear for a week because you have
It's
time to do
exactly
laundry.
right. It's exactly
Here's
right.
the tagline for this show: dirty hair, no underwear, don't care.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Absolutely. Well, one of the things we do love about you so much is your vulnerability, your authenticity. And I think that is such an important thing for writers and speakers and podcasters to understand, is that just endears an audience to you. Be who you are, be yourself. You can't say that too many times. That's one of the
Agreed.
reasons we love Better Than Okay. What do you love about this book?
I realized after I wrote the book and all the edits were done and it was time to write the acknowledgments, I wrote an acknowledgement to my kids. And in writing that acknowledgement, I realized that I didn't just tell my story, I told our story of, I call us four. I told the story of us four and how proud I am of all four of us for sticking it out and, you know, continuing to show up when it was hard. And when we moved into this house together, naming it a house of truth, and they all grasp onto that. And I think that's what I'm most proud of, is it's kind of a legacy that's left that helps them remember, and hopefully future generations, what we walked through and how, you know, we leaned on God in the midst of it. And I'm just super proud of the fact it's the story of the four of us. Nothing I love more than being a mom. So the fact that I could capture how, because there are stories about all the kids scattered through the book. I have three sons, about all of them. And I think just to have all that captured and the faithfulness of God in the midst of something that felt so dark feels like a gift.
So good. So
A
good.
gift for you and your boys, and a gift for everybody who's going to get this book and everyone that's been blessed by it so far. Well, we've said it so much. Lisa and I are crazy about you. We love the work that you're putting out in the world, the way you live so intentionally and authentically. You've walked through hell and back, and you're carrying buckets of water for women right now. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you for coming on the show. We can't wait to have you again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Called Creatives podcast. Be sure to download your free book proposal template. You can go to calledcreatives.com/book-proposal. We created it just for you. So whether you're writing this for an agent or to organize your thoughts before you write, this template will help your book process be a huge success. We'll see you back here on the Called Creatives podcast.